In Generation 1 as a kid, it was almost impossible to add Kangaskhan or Chansey to your party. The only location where you can catch these Pokemon is in the Safari Zone, and they are very rare. Plus, you can't weaken them or inflict status conditions, so catching them with the awful Safari Balls is terrible. Plus, you might have been seduced into using the bait or the rock option, and neither of those are very good ideas. You should just be spamming Pokeballs to try and catch things. Anyway, I never caught these Pokemon as a kid, so I couldn't use them in the game. Well, I did end up picking up Chansey once I got to Cerulean Cave in Yellow version, because it is available there. That said, this is after the majority of the plot line, so then of course I'm not going to add it to my team. Game Freak decided this was good game design going into the second generation, so of course they hid Kangaskhan and Chansey away in Kanto and didn't allow players to get access to them during the majority of the storyline. Kangaskhan is found inside of Rock Tunnel, and it is only a 5% chance encounter on the basement floor. Also, Game Freak clearly thought that this was too generous, so in Crystal version, they reduced the chance that you could find Kangaskhan, removing it as an encounter from the nighttime encounter tables. It is only available during the morning and the day. I guess this is kind of flavorful. Maybe Mama Kangaskhan is tending to her baby at nighttime, but then she's out and about foraging for food during the day. That's kind of cool, but it's really annoying that this Pokemon is just even more difficult to find. Now, speaking of difficult to find, Chansey is even worse. It's available in 3 routes, which initially seems very promising, but then you realize they're the routes to the east of Fuchsia City, and yeah, why would you go over there? There's Cycling Road to move around the map much more quickly. And also, on these routes, there is very limited grass, and by this point in the game, you're usually not searching for a long time, which means you'll probably never run into Chansey because it is a 1% chance encounter. And of course, the only way to get Blissey is to evolve Chansey. It's a friendship evolution, so that's gonna take you quite some time. This was the main thematic reason why I wanted to link these Pokemon together in a single versus video. But there is one other reason, and that's that these are normal types that do not have the slow growth rate. Last week we covered the ones that did, so today Kangaskhan has a medium fast growth rate, and both Chansey and Blissey have a fast growth rate. So you might be wondering, is the final video this year in Crystal, which is coming next week, going to be normal types with the medium slow growth rate, which is by far the best for solo challenges? And the answer is no, because in Generation 1 and 2, there are no normal types that have that growth rate. For next week's video, I'm going to have to do something else to raise the stakes. And speaking of stakes, what are the chances that Kangaskhan loses here? Because as we saw earlier in the year when I interviewed Snowy about their Pokemon Crystal Kangaskhan run, this thing is amazing. It got a sub-hour time within that format. In my format, it's going to be a little bit slower because I start the timer when I click New Game, not when I'm leaving Elm's Lab with my Pokemon. That said, I still don't think it's always obvious why Kangaskhan is so good within the solo running format. So let's go through it. Number 1, it's not held back by its growth rate. The medium fast growth rate is not amazing, but it's also not awful. It levels up fairly slowly in the early game, but by the late game, it can level up very quickly. That is, relative to Pokemon in the slow growth rate or the medium slow growth rate. Number 2, Kangaskhan's base stats are uniquely designed to be good in this format. 105 HP, 95 attack, 80 defense, 90 speed, 40 special attack, and 80 special defense. So it's got good defensive stats, a really high HP stat, making it incredibly bulky. It has excellent attack, which synergizes with the physical normal type in Generations 1, 2, and 3. Also, it has low special attack, and I think that that's an advantage for it in most scenarios, because there's a lot of Pokemon that would have like less speed and more special attack, but that doesn't really help the Pokemon out that much, because how often is Kangaskhan going to be using special attacks? And the answer is that it could use special attacks because it actually has pretty good coverage. Through TM and HM, it learns Zap Cannon, Rock Smash, Blizzard, Icy Wind, Rain Dance, Iron Tail, Earthquake, Shadow Ball, Mud Slap, Ice Punch, Fire Blast, Thunder Punch, Fire Punch, Fury Cutter, Surf, and then through Move Tutor, it gets Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, and Ice Beam. This Pokemon essentially has whatever you want. I guess the one downside is it doesn't learn Swift as a normal move, but it still does get Headbutt and Return. Through level up, Kangaskhan does not start with an amazing move, Comet Punch. It has 18 base power and 85% accuracy, accuracy. It is a multi-hit move, so it's decent in terms of the amount of damage it can put out, but sometimes it just misses or only hits twice. Luckily at level 7 it gets Leer, which can combo well with Comet Punch, especially because that move only has 15 PP, so I can use Leer to lower the opponent's defense and not run out of PP, minimizing the number of times I have to go to the Pokemon Center to heal. At level 13 it gets Bite, which in Generation 2 is a dark type move, so it deals special damage. It's not going to be that useful other than as a boost for my PP reserves. At 19 it gets Tail Whip, the perfect complement to Leer. And then at 25 it gets Mega Punch. Beyond that, the level up moves go downhill. Rage, Endure, Dizzy Punch, and Reversal. That said, it will have access to the Endure Reversal strategy that Heracross used against Red earlier this year. And speaking of bug-type Pokemon, let's bring up the tier list as it stands right now. I went into this year with a hypothesis that normal-type Pokemon were going to be the strongest overall in Pokemon Crystal. There are so many reasons this should be the case. An attack boost from Faulkner's badge, a normal-type boost from Whitney's badge, and then return with the same type attack bonus, and a terrible level curve throughout the majority of the game. However, now that we're looking at the results from the entire year, there was a sleeper type that I didn't expect to come along. The bug type. Scizor, Scyther, Pinsir, and Heracross all earned themselves S-tier placements. And there's an honorable mention here, Kleavor, which is a backport from Generation 9. It earned itself the 4th overall spot, so it was still really good. By the way, since Kleavor is a backport, I shouldn't include it in the total number of Pokemon ranked, so we're just going to drop that down from 82 to 81. Okay, so right now the top time in the tier list is Scissor's 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 6 seconds. The top ranked normal type Pokemon is Furret with a time of 1 hour, 8 minutes, and 38 seconds. So it is not close to even Scyther, which had a time that was extremely comparable with Scizor, 1 hour, 6 minutes, and 13 seconds. Pinsir on the other hand is a bit slower than Furret, 1 hour, 9 minutes, and 18 seconds. And that brings us to the bulk of normal types in the S tier, Granbull with 109, and Clefable and Ursaring with 110. Miltank is behind this, largely because of its slow growth rate with a time of 1 hour, 12 minutes, and 35 seconds. These are all outstanding results. Anything under 1 hour and 15 minutes is good for Pokemon Crystal. Now, if there is one normal type native to Generation 1 and 2 that can outperform Scizor and Scyther, I think it is going to be Kangaskhan. Alright, with all of that introduction out of the way, now let's get into these playthroughs. In the early game, I didn't do minimum battles. I played this run on September 13th, and back then I was still playing quite conservatively in my first playthroughs. Still, I'm not going to be extremely conservative, so I don't go into Sprout Tower, instead heading straight for the gym. Birdkeeper Abe has been problematic. He was with Scizor and Scyther, but in this case with Kangaskhan, I have so much defense and HP that the Spearow is just not going to do well. I go for a single Leer and then use Comet Punch, which gets a 3-hit, knocking the Spearow out in only 1 turn. With Abe cleared, Rod is a pushover, so now let's take on Faulkner. Up first is Pidgey. I go for a Comet Punch right away. It hits twice, doing about half, and then Kangaskhan takes 3 hit points of damage from Tackle. I don't think I need to be worried here. I also have a Berry. Pidgey goes down. Pidgeotto's next. I use Leer just to speed up my progress. Gust is doing, I guess, decent damage, but not enough to threaten Kangaskhan. She ends up eating her Berry, but that's as threatened as I've felt in this playthrough. After that, Comet Punch knocks out the Pidgeotto, and I earn myself the first badge, which gives Kangaskhan a 12.5% boost to her attack stat. Now, over the next section of the game, we're going to take a moment and talk about some Generation 2 mechanics, specifically related to gender. So, reading directly from Bulbapedia, in Generation 2, a Pokemon's gender is determined based solely on its physical attack IV when compared with its gender ratio. Technically, it's not its IV, it's a DV. I'm not sure if they've changed their terminology in recent days. Anyways, DVs range from 0 to 15. So, if your Pokemon, say, has a 13 out of 15, then we would turn that into a percentage and compare it with the gender ratio. If the gender ratio is 50-50, then that Pokemon will be male. But if you have, say, a 3 attack, then your Pokemon will be female. What this means is female Pokemon always have worse attack stats when compared with their male counterparts. Starting in Generation 3, they did away with this mechanic. Although I want to make a case for why it's actually interesting in these solo challenges. So I want to use male Pokemon in most cases in Generation 2. This is specifically so I have a high attack DV and I can deal as much damage damage as is possible with every single one of my attacking moves. By the way, they mean the attack IV, the defense, special, and speed DVs are completely unaffected by this calculation, so every single Pokemon can have max special attack. Anyway, back to using a male Pokemon. This can be a disadvantage because then Flannery can use Attract on your Pokemon. Most trainers throughout the game have Pokemon that correspond with their gender, so then a trainer later into the game like Red is going to have all male Pokemon, which causes a strategical constraint because I can't use Attract against his Pokemon. I have recently been discovering how good this move can be in Pokemon Emerald, and not having access to it in the majority of Generation 2 runs does centralize the metagame around moves like Curse and Return. For example, last year when I played Pichu, I really considered using a low attack DV Pichu just to get Attract for later into the run. I didn't end up going with that strategy, but today with Kangaskhan, we don't even need to worry about that. Actually, with all three of these Pokemon, they are always female. As a result, they can have a maxed attack DV and still use the powerful status move. And they will also be able to avoid it from Whitney. Okay, getting caught back up with the playthrough, I haven't been fighting too many optional trainers using Kangaskhan. I'm arriving at Bugsy just under level 15. While I don't have damage rounding on my side, I still think this should be fine for Kangaskhan, so let's see how it goes. Metapod is first. I'm going to go for Comet Punch right away. It does a lot in this case, knocking out the Cocoon in one turn with a 5 hit. Next is Kakuna. One advantage Kangaskhan has here, while Comet Punch can do a lot of damage, I could use Bite for special damage to bypass boosts on their defense with Harden. That said, I just get another 5 hit with Comet Punch. Okay, time for the Scyther. Here, I'm going to use Leer on turn 1. Luckily, Bugsy's Ace does not set up with Fury Cutter, instead prioritizing Quick Attack. I then use Comet Punch, getting a 3 hit, which does half to the Scyther. Fury Cutter is not stacking up fast enough, and as a result, I take a win on my next turn. For the rival, Kangaskhan has everything it needs. Mudslap and Bite for the Ghastly. This means even if it puts me to sleep and uses a bunch of Spite, I still have a fallback move that I can use to knock it out because it does take 2 hits. Zubat that's next I use Comet Punch against. It misses its Supersonic, so I move on to the Bayleaf. This one's a bit annoying. It sets up with Reflect and it's pretty defensive, so it takes time to knock out. I probably should have just spammed Leer at the beginning of this battle, lowered its defense a bunch, and then used Comet Punch once Reflect had gone away, or just before Reflect was going away. This ends up getting quite close because Razorleaf can occasionally crit. It gets a single crit, bringing Kangaskhan down to orange health. She eats her berry. Then Razorleaf hits again, getting another crit. Kangaskhan survives with 10 hit points, uses Bite, and Bayleaf faints. This battle is typically one of the most difficult in the early game of Pokemon Crystal. So now let's talk about the other 2 Pokemon that are going to be in this video. We'll start with Blissey, because this is the better scenario. Chansey is worse. Obviously, it evolves into Blissey. This round, well, more egg-shaped Pokemon is not really a big upgrade to Chansey in my opinion, at least design-wise. In terms of stats, some of them even double, but that's because its attack and its defense are 10. It has 255 HP, which is the maximum possible base stat, and then it has 55 speed, 75 special attack, and 130 special defense. Blissey is supposed to be a bulky special defender. It falls apart to physical attacks, and it is terrible when it uses physical attacks, and that is a major problem. Please guide your eyes over to the right side of the screen and look at the move pool with me. It starts with Pound, learns Growl at level 4, Tail Whip at level 7, Soft Boiled at level 10, which is a recovery move. I'm sure I'm gonna love this throughout these playthroughs. Double Slap at 13, Minimize at 18, which is banned because these are the rules for these solo challenges. Sing at 23, just in case I want to put Pokemon to sleep and miss a bunch while doing so. Egg Bomb at level 28, which is a physical move. Light Screen at level 40, and Double Edge at level 47. None of the moves it learns are special. They're all physical. It is not supposed to attack. It is supposed to defend. I can see how the developers wanted this thing to play out. You're using Soft Boiled while setting up with moves like Minimize, maybe using Sing, Defense Curl, and Light Screen for your team. Now, just glance at the TM and HM learn set. There's a lot of really good stuff in here, right? Some special moves, Zap Cannon, Blizzard, Icy Wind, Solar Beam, Thunder, Psychic, Fire Blast, Dream Eater, and all 3 of the tutor moves. Pretty good, right? Well, let's go through each one of these moves and think about where we obtain it. Zap Cannon is in Kanto. Blizzard is purchased from the Game Corner for the equivalent number of coins as 110,000 Pokédollars. Icy Wind is the prize from Pryce. It has 55 base power and 95% accuracy. Solar Beam is obtained only after you can use Waterfall, so I have to defeat Claire to get access to it. Thunder is also from the game corner, same amount as Blizzard. Psychic is only obtainable in Saffron City after Lance is defeated. Shadow Ball is a physical move in generations 2 and 3 because ghosts deal physical damage and makes tons of sense, right? Mud Slap is a physical move because ground type moves are physical. Fire Blast is the same as Blizzard and Thunder. Dream Eater is only available in Kanto, and all of the tutors are only accessible after Lance has been defeated. So what that means is that Blissey is going to have to utilize its 10 base attack to get me through the majority of the game. Now, I could stop in Goldenrod City and gamble for Blizzard, Thunder, and Fire Blast. There is, if you didn't know, a lucky slot machine which is only available during the morning. However, even this lucky slot machine does not have good enough odds that will make this a time-conscious choice. It is going to be faster to just pound my way through the game with physical moves. And if you're wondering why, I ended up testing the slot machine to see how long it would take to get one of these TMs. And I didn't even get one of the TMs. I sat there for about 15 minutes and earned almost no coins. I have used this strategy before to earn those TMs, but only after I've got a significant amount of money. I'm really just using the slot machine to top up the last 500 or 600 coins in order to buy whatever I need. So if Blizzard, Thunder, and Fire Blast are not available to Blissey, then the first special move it will get access to is Hidden Power. Although in my first playthroughs, to make Pokemon Crystal more interesting, I have banned this move. It's only going to be available for the follow-up run. As a result, the first and only special move that I'm going to have access to before I either earn enough money to buy one of the Game Corner TMs or defeat Lance to get access to the tutors is going to be Icy Wind. So, Blissey, it's going to be bad, right? Yeah, it's going to be bad. Maybe its fast growth rate is really going to help it. Well, that's where we need to understand growth rates. So let's bring up this chart from Bulbapedia. On it, the fast growth rate is represented by the green line. Now, lower values here mean the Pokemon levels up more quickly. Higher values here mean the Pokemon levels up very slowly. So you can see the erratic growth rate is terrible in the early game and amazing by the late game. The slow growth rate and the medium fast growth rate are also not great in the early game, but they're pretty linear throughout the remainder of the playthrough. Now, the fast growth rate is not as good as the medium slow growth rate. The medium slow growth rate takes a lot of experience in the very early levels, but as you can see from the x-axis labels, this is before level 5, so with these solo challenges, it is fantastic in the early game, and it ends up being the better growth rate for this section of the game when compared with the fast growth rate, which around level 30 then becomes better. And after that, since the erratic and fluctuating growth rates were introduced in Generation 3, the fast growth rate is the best growth rate for Generation 2. So yes, the fast growth rate is going to be an advantage for Blissey. But how much of an advantage? Because as you can see here against the rival's Chikorita, which is level 5, it takes me forever to knock it out using Pound, which even gets the same type attack bonus and has an effective power of 60. Unlike with Kangaskhan, I'm going to do a lot of early game training because I think Blissey is going to need as much experience as I can get. So that involves me defeating all of the trainers on the routes leading up to Violet City. Also, I am going to go into Sprout Tower and defeat all of the sages here for extra experience. Doing this levels Blissey up to 13. By this point, its moveset has expanded. Pound, Growl, Tail Whip, and Soft Boiled, and I have the chance to add Double Slap. But its damage on average will not be as good as Pound, and I want to hold on to Growl and Tail Whip, as well as Soft Boiled so that I can play more defensively using Blissey. By the time I'm facing Abe, I am so over-leveled that he's not a threat. Blissey 3-shots. It is starting to do okay with its attacking stats, although looking over at its special attack, which is currently 29, I'm really sad that I have to be using 12 physical attack. I level up one more time on Birdkeeper Rod to 14. This pushes my attack up to 13. Alright, time to take on Faulkner. Okay, so Blissey can just attack here because both Pidgey and Pidgeotto are not doing enough damage even with their physical attacks. I was worried that Gust would be doing a lot more than it was and I would have to use a move like Growl to lower attack, but it doesn't seem like that's necessary. If Blissey's health ever falls too low, which it's not going to because it has ridiculous HP, 101 right now at the first gym leader. Anyways, if that ever happens, I can just use Soft Boil and recover half of my health with no downside. I'm going to play the next section of the game very conservatively, backtracking to Route 29 to pick up the Pink Bow to increase the damage that Blissey can deal. In a lot of cases with normal type Pokemon like Kangaskhan for example, this is just not relevant because it's already doing enough damage. The time spent backtracking isn't worth it. You can pick up the Pink Bow later when you get Fly or after you defeat all the Rockets in Radio Tower. There are 2 Pink Bows available in this game, by the way. On my way to Azalea Town, I fight nearly every trainer. Ralph, even though he's kind of scary sometimes with Supersonic, as well as the youngster with Wooper. It has bad experience yields. I like to avoid this guy, but I'm trying to put put the time in now. I would prefer if Blissey doesn't get walled at some point in the game because it's using only physical moves. I wanted to continue this training inside a Union Cave, so I end up teaching Mud Slap in the place of Growl. That allows me to have super effective damage against rock-type Pokemon and knock them out decently quickly. One trainer I am going to skip is Hiker Anthony just outside of Union Cave. Having his Machop use Low Kick on Blissey is not something that I want to deal with right now. After defeating all the trainers in Bugsy's gym, Blissey is level 20, so this should be enough for Bugsy. Right? Well, I was wrong about that, because once I make it to the Scyther, things go very poorly for me. I use Tail Whip. The fact that I am doing so little damage every turn is a problem. Although my first hit is a crit, but that still doesn't save me from the Scyther as Fury Cutter gets more and more powerful. Blissey just barely doesn't have the time it needs to knock the Scyther out. I was one turn away from victory there. The problem is, my moveset doesn't really help me now. I think Growl would have been more helpful against the Scyther. I could lower its attack until it maxes out its damage with Fury Cutter, then potentially survive the hits and use Soft Boiled to stall it out until Fury Cutter misses and resets in power. Then I could use Pound to knock it out, but I don't have access to Growl anymore, so I'm gonna have to do things with my current set. There are other risks along the way too, because the Kakuna could potentially poison me with Poison Sting, and then I'm gonna lose even more health per turn from the Scyther. This time without a critical hit, Blissey doesn't even get close to knocking the Scyther out. I am not liking my odds here anymore. In the next battle, I get poisoned by the Kakuna, so this one is also a loss. If you had to guess right now, what's it going to take for Blissey to beat Bugsy? Well, I hope you said a Fury Cutter miss. Once this happens, that gives me just enough time to finish off the Scyther. I also get a critical hit along the way, so with that, Bugsy is defeated, but Blissey just purely lucked through this fight. It has Mud Slap for the rival, but this is a little bit more sketchy than with Kangaskhan because I don't have Bite as backup. Using it lowers accuracy, so I'm less likely to be hit by Hypnosis or Spite, although the Ghastly could lower my PP and cause a reset here. It doesn't. As a result, I move on to the Zubat, get confused, it's a bit annoying, but then I knock it out. Bayleaf is last, and with my ridiculous special defense, I'm going to take so little damage from Razor Leaf every turn that I can essentially just stall this Pokemon out as long as I want. If Blissey gets by the Ghastly, this fight is a foregone conclusion. Okay, with that fight out of the way, now let's go back and talk about Chansey. I have to tell you, I hate this Pokemon. I do not like it one bit. It's fine in Pokemon Yellow when special is a unified quantity, but in this game, they gave it its former special stat as its special defense, replacing its special attack with the value 35. Yeah, Chansey doesn't have a lot going for it. It has a ton of HP, 250, only 5 less than Blissey, but its attack and defense stats are 5, and its speed is 50. This Pokemon is just kind of bad at everything except having a lot of HP, and like Blissey, it has the same move pool, which is just terrible for me doing a solo challenge. Once again, Icy Wind is going to be my first special move. But unlike Blissey, Chansey has 40 less special attack. When I was initially deciding on which Pokemon to pair together in Versus videos, I looked at Kangaskhan and Blissey. Blissey has a much higher base stat total, and I figured maybe it would be fun to put those two together because Kangaskhan is basically going to outperform most other Pokemon that are normal types. Chansey just doesn't fit well with any other Pokemon. Maybe I could put it up against a baby Pokemon, but it is so similar to Blissey, I think it just makes sense to explain how its solo runs work in the same video. Although that did make me procrastinate so much on getting these runs done. I really did not want to play Chansey. The only redeemable thing is its back sprite, which honestly I think is perfect. It has the cutest little tail, and it just looks so round. I'm gonna say it again, but Chansey is so much better aesthetically when compared with Blissey. Now in these solo challenges, Chansey has an advantage, because I like to play these versus videos in a specific order. Always best Pokemon first, underdog last. And obviously Chansey is our underdog, so I'm playing this run last, which gives me more experience. Well, as a player, because I don't have more experience going into Falkner, defeating the maximum number of trainers, just like Blissey did with Chansey, is going to yield the same level because they have the same growth rate. What this means is that Chansey is going to have to beat the majority of the game at the same level that Blissey is going to have to do it at, unless I'm grinding on wild Pokemon or trainers that are significantly out of the way. And both of those scenarios are going to lose Chansey a lot of time because of the Johto level curve. Luckily, it has no problems here against Falkner. Now, speaking of level curve problems, I'm going to battle less trainers with Chansey when compared with Blissey because I I don't want to teach Mud Slap. That means these two hikers inside of the cave are not experience that I can earn quickly. Still though, the fast growth rate is pretty good. By the time I arrive at Bugsy, Chansey is also level 20. Now let's check out the Growl strategy against the Scyther. Lowering its attack every turn is pretty good to minimize the damage from Fury Cutter. But if Chansey's been poisoned earlier in the fight against the Kakuna, which takes quite some time because it's a defensive Pokemon, then I don't have the ability to heal enough with Soft Boiled, and eventually Fury Cutter's power gets too high and Chansey goes down. I'm poisoned in the next battle as well, so I get a second loss, but in the third fight against Bugsy, I am not poisoned. In this case, watch how Growl works. It's actually pretty good. Lowering the Scyther's attack stat 3 times means it's not doing enough damage with a max roll from Fury Cutter to knock out Chansey. So I can then use Soft Boiled over and over again, hoping that eventually the Scyther is going to miss. Also, Chansey has so much HP that along the way I squeeze in one Tail Whip, improving my damage when I eventually attack. The problem is Fury Cutter really doesn't like to miss. It only has a 5% chance. Eventually though it does, I heal up and then I start using Pound. Fury Cutter now has to stack up all over again, giving Chansey the time it needs to defeat Bugsy's final Pokemon. The battle against the rival is essentially the same as Blissey, it's just a little bit more annoying because Mud Slap doesn't do as much damage to the Ghastly. Okay, now we have a sense for how these Pokemon stack up against each other. Kangaskhan is a beast, Blissey and Chansey are both pathetic. Let's go back over to Kangaskhan and see how it does during the next section of the game. I was expecting domination because in Ilex Forest it gets access to Headbutt, a 70 base power move which has 105 base power before Whitney's badge, and it will have even more after I defeat her. Plus it has a 30% chance to flinch, and Kangaskhan is very fast, so it's going to be moving first in most cases. One exception to this is coming up right around the corner. North of Goldenrod City I fight the one guy with 2 Magmar just to get a little bit more experience, but still once I arrive in Whitney's gym and defeat the mandatory trainer, my Kangaskhan is still level 19 with only 47 speed. The Miltank has 48. Kangaskhan's so strong though, I think this should be fine. Let's try. Clefairy's up first. I am able to 2-shot using Headbutt. It goes for Double Slap, doing only 6 points of damage before I knock it out. Miltank is next. I'm not moving first, it starts Rollout. Headbutt looks like it's doing about a quarter, and that made me very worried. If I don't 3-shot, and I'm not going to, and I can't flinch to break Rollout's combo, I am relying on the fact that it's going to miss. In this case, it doesn't. Miltank hangs on with red health, uses Rollout one last time, and Kangaskhan faints, getting its first reset. I kept trying to make this work at level 19, but it turns out Kangaskhan is in the optimally bad position at this level. One more higher, it gets the outspeed and it goes over a damage rounding threshold. I think that it makes no sense to be fighting her at this level. After taking 3 additional resets for a total of 4, I finally decide to train up and just make this fight much easier on myself. Inside the gym right before Whitney, there's one trainer with 3 Jigglypuff who is perfect to defeat to get Kangaskhan to level 20 as quickly as possible. Now, I'm not kicking myself for these losses here. It actually is a good demonstration of what's possible if you just don't level enough with Kangaskhan in the early game. At level 20 now I have 49 speed, so I can move first against the Miltank. I was hoping that I would get a 3-shot over the damage rounding threshold, but I'm not. Still, the fact that I'm moving first means I'm going to take less damage from Rollout, so even though I don't 3-hit, she's still easy. Whitney's badge gives a 12.5% boost to my Pokemon's speed stat, and it also gives a 12.5% boost to all normal type damage. I go back to the department store next and pick up some coverage moves, Ice Punch and Fire Punch. I teach Ice Punch right away, but then later once I arrive in Ecruteak City and clear out the Kimono Girls, I decide to teach Fire Punch before the rival in Burned Tower. I wanted to have good damage against the Magnemite, and I thought that Fire Punch would do more when compared with Mud Slap. The problem is, Bite is special and it's not doing very much to the Haunter, although I cause a flinch on the first turn, which is perfect so it doesn't land Curse, although I fail to knock out on the next turn so it still gets off the volatile status condition. Now, I might have been wrong about Fire Punch because I use it on the Magnemite and it just barely does not get the knockout, so I take Curse damage and I also get hit by Supersonic. Kangaskhan hits itself, I take damage from Sonic Boom, and this fight is essentially over unless I one-hit both the Zubat and the Bayleaf. Unfortunately though, the rival's final Pokemon is quite bulky, so without a critical hit I'm not able to do it, and I take my 5th reset here. In the next fight I roll better damage with Bite on my 2nd hit on the Haunter, so it goes down over 2 hits and is unable to set up with Curse. So even though I don't one-shot the Magnemite using Fire Punch, I actually do less damage. I'm not as worried about it. It also misses Supersonic, so I'm in a great position by the time I move on to the Zubat, and from there the Bayleaf is not going to be able to stop me. After Burned Tower, last year I would have gone all the way over to the lighthouse and done extra training before coming back to face Morty. This gives a small advantage because on the way to Olivine City I can pick up the Mint Berry. However, I've been playing a bunch of races with Steve M Plays and Speedrunner, and this experience has taught me that when you have a Pokemon that has good moves against Morty and an outspeed on Gengar, it doesn't really make sense to add the extra walking time now, because I will have to retrace my steps to Olivine City if I do it in that order. But if I go to Morty's gym and defeat him now without a Mint Berry, it's a little bit more concise. This is risky for one reason, because I don't have a Mint Berry. If the Gengar successfully lands Hypnosis, then there is a potential for a reset. However, we do need to remember that Hypnosis is affected by the AI accuracy debuff. So when used by the AI, it only has a 45% chance to hit. And I think that that's going to give Kangaskhan a very easy win over Morty. Even if I get one reset, I still think he'll come out here ahead in terms of time. Ghastly's first bite does not get the one hit, so it's able to inflict Curse. Not a great way for this battle to start. I go for Bite on the Haunter, hoping for a flinch. I don't get it. It goes for Hypnosis, luckily missing. I knock it out on the next turn and move on to Gengar. Bite does like a third. Okay, I was expecting more damage here. Luckily, Hypnosis misses. My next bite does not flinch. Kangaskhan is faster. Gengar gets to go for a third Hypnosis, and Morty misses for a third time in a row. As a result, I knock out the Gengar, move on to the final Haunter, and here I level up, gaining a little bit more health, which is incredibly important because I think that Curse was gonna knock me out. With the small amount of additional health, I go down to 4 hit points, surviving and use Bite one more time, defeating Morty. This was close, but next time around it's gonna be much easier for Kangaskhan. I have a choice now. Go to Chuck and fight the gym leader that has a type advantage over Kangaskhan, or go to Pryce, do all the rocket plotline, gain a few more levels, make Chuck far easier, but have a little bit more backtracking time in the mid-game. Once again, I'm going to choose the more concise and risky choice. So I'm going to Olivine City, exploring the lighthouse, and then heading across the sea to Cyanwood City. The tag team black belts are pretty scary for Kangaskhan. I am faster and I'm using physical moves, which is good against the Hitmons. They have incredible special defense. I was still worried about the Hitmonlee using Jump Kick, but in this case Headbutt flinches and I knock it out for free. The Hitmonchan, on the other hand, is very simple. It has no fighting type moves. Comet Punch, Thunder Punch, Ice Punch, and Fire Punch. Nob is next. His team of fighting types do have fighting type moves, but they're not very good unless you're weak to rock type moves. In that case, the Machoke's Rock Slide can do a lot of damage. Kangaskhan pulls through with no issues, so now let's take on Chuck. One of the most random and unpredictable gym leaders in the entire region. There's the potential to get a reset here, but there's also the potential to just win with pure luck. Primeape gets flinched right away with Headbutt, so it's not able to do anything, going down to my second attack. Poliwrath's next. This one I crit, and it also flinches. As a result, I attack it one more time, and that's that for Chuck. Alright, good job Kangaskhan. This was really simple. It gets a 27 minute and 52 second 5th gym split. So now, let's go back to the bad Pokemon. Both Blissey and Chansey can learn Headbutt, which is a big upgrade to Pound, but it's still a physical move. Also, their speed stats being lower than Kangaskhan's means they're going to be moving second against Whitney's Miltank. However, I do have an answer for her because north of Goldenrod City, I can pick up the TM for Rollout and use her own strategy against her. At least, that's what you're expecting that I'm going to do, right? Well, with Blissey, I was thinking a different thing. What if I use Sing to break Rollout's combo, Soft Boil to heal, Mudslap to lower accuracy, and then Headbutt for damage? This is a really complicated way of solving the problem that is Whitney, and it doesn't work out particularly well. As you will all know, Sing is an absolutely terrible move and it loves to miss. However, I think I'm contractually required at this point to use sleep-inducing moves whenever my Pokemon has them, at least once during playthroughs, so I gave it a go here. It didn't go well during the first fight. I have one reset with Blissey. I come back in after that. This time around, Sing eventually works and I'm able to knock out the Miltank slowly using Headbutt. And I mean slowly because it wakes up, I have to put it back to sleep, use a bunch more soft boileds. This is just not a time efficient way of winning. Even if I had a reset with Rollout, I still would have won in less time. Well, now we all know this strategy is obviously worse. With Chansey, when I fight Whitney, I do the Rollout strategy. Blissey gets a 30-minute and 15 split with 1 reset on Whitney, whereas Chansey gets a 32-minute and 30-second split on Whitney with no resets here using rollout. This is how I'm going to approach the next section of the game. I'm going to do a major battle, show you how it went with Blissey, talk about all the things I did during the route up until that point, and then show you Chansey's footage right after. Again, these two Pokemon are so similar, it'll just be a waste of time if I go through them each individually in sections. Okay, inside Ecruteak City, I'm going to make a different choice when compared with Kangaskhan's route. After defeating the Kimono girls, I'm going to go to the Lake of Rage to clear out trainers. On my way, I fight this guy. He's a Pokemaniac with Nidoking and Nidoqueen. They're fantastic experience yields, and even though they have fighting type moves, Blissey is competent enough to defeat both of them. Thing is, during this battle I level up and I have the chance to learn Egg Bomb. This is a 100 base power normal type move with 75% accuracy. I sat there for a moment after not learning it, thinking if I should go back, and I end up deciding to reset to get this move with Blissey. Luckily I saved before the Pokemaniac with the Nidos, so I don't lose that much time. After defeating some of the trainers around the Lake of Rage, I go to the Lighthouse to continue my training. This brings Blissey up to level 32 before I head back to the Burned Tower to take on the rival. The Haunter is annoying because Mudslap is only doing 1/3. Luckily, I drop accuracy and it just chooses Spite. It continues to go for this move, not cursing Blissey before I knock it out with 4 uses of Mudslap. The ground type move with 4 times damage does half to the Magnemite. This is how bad Blissey's attacking stat is. Luckily, Supersonic misses, I knock it out, move on to the Zubat, and here I use Egg Bomb for the first time and it gets a 1-hit. Okay, that's decent. Next is Bayleaf. I continue using Egg Bomb, it does just under half. Luckily, the Bayleaf has nothing that it can do to us. Look at how little damage Blissey takes from Razor Leaf. Honestly, it looks like the Bayleaf is using Constrict against me, although that might do more damage to Blissey with how low my physical defense is. Okay, Morty is next, and for this fight I have taught Blissey Rollout. I need something that's going to do a lot more damage when compared with Mudslap after how little it was doing against the rival's Haunter. Luckily, once again, the first Pokemon does not use Curse, instead prioritizing Spite. Maybe this is an AI quirk if I'm using a normal type, although it doesn't seem like that's the case because the second Haunter then uses Curse, knocking itself out, which is good for me because I can take no curse damage and move on to the Gengar with a rollout that's doing a lot of damage, although not quite enough to knock out Morty's lead. I was worried that it was going to use Hypnosis and break my combo, but luckily, for the 4th time in this video, Hypnosis misses and I knock out Morty's ace. There is still a problem for Blissey here because my rollout reset now and I have to start it again against the Haunter. It's doing very little damage and I'm taking decent damage from Curse. Plus, the Haunter is using Spike consistently, lowering rollout's PP. That said, the only time this move deducts PP is the first time it's used, so Blissey's not going to have problems there unless it misses, and it doesn't, so with that, Morty's defeated. I play slightly more concisely with Chansey, not going to the Lake of Rage. Instead, I just do the Lighthouse and then come back and face the rival. I have rollout here, and while it is kind of slow against his Pokemon, it's fine. I knock out the Zubat, then it resets, and I have to use it again for the Bayleaf. First, I use Mudslap, just lowering its accuracy a little bit. I don't think this is strictly required. Then I can use Soft Boil to out-heal Curse, and Headbutt to knock the Bayleaf out. This takes quite a bit of time, but eventually Chansey pulls through with a win. Now, I had the experience of playing Blissey, so inside the gym, I say no to Egg Bomb. It didn't end up being that helpful with Blissey, plus what would I delete right now with Chansey? I do want to hang on to all these moves, because I need something to solve Jasmine's Pokemon, and I think Mudslap will be my go-to move against the Magnemites. Chansey is fighting Morty at level 35, 1 level higher than Blissey. In this case, I have just enough speed to move first against the Gengar. 65, it has 64. In this case with Chansey, I was a little bit surprised. I am holding the Mint Berry here, not the Hard Stone, and even then, I am able to one-shot the Gengar, so that's pretty good. I have to reestablish rollout on the Haunter. This takes time, and it's actually really scary. Chansey is brought down to 2 hit points by Curse. This Haunter doesn't have any moves that can attack normal type Pokemon, unless it uses Mimic to steal something like rollout, which is what happens, and that's a little bit scary for Chansey. As the Haunter sets up more and more rollouts, it's going to do increasingly more physical damage. Normally, a Haunter dealing physical damage isn't something I have to worry about, but with Chansey's base 5 defense, this was frightening. Still, I am just barely able to pull through on 37 hit points and knock out Morty's final Pokemon. Okay, back to Blissey. For this one, I am going to be going to the Lake of Rage next and then exploring the Rocket Hideout, completing this area of the game and then defeating Pryce. I think this makes far more sense than Chuck. We just don't have the physical damage to utilize Headbutt effectively against him. Also, I want Icy Wind as fast as possible so I can begin using special moves. The Rocket plotline is very simple, so now let's move on to Pryce and see how he is. I'm sure you're all expecting he's going to be really easy, and he is. I flinched the seal, Dugong's next. It's slow to knock out, takes 4 turns for Blissey, but I get 2 flinches along the way. That leaves only Piloswine. Now, it does attack with Blizzard, but look at how much damage it does. Blissey is an absolute beast when it comes to special defense. This thing would be fantastic as a special wall in a Nuzlocke. Unfortunately though, you're never going to get one because Chansey is a 1% encounter. Actually, let me know in the comments if anyone has ever used this Pokemon in Generation 1 or 2 during a Nuzlocke, because if you have, that has to be one of the most hype catches of all time. Unfortunately for Chansey, I do not get to just jump into the Pryce battle. I lost to the red Gyarados because it was doing so much damage with Thrash. I ended up taking a blackout here instead of a reset because it didn't save right in front of it and I didn't want to waste a bunch of additional time. Although this blackout is still not great because I'm teleported all the way back to Ecruteak City. I wanted to keep this as my teleport waypoint so that I can use it after I defeat Pryce to get back to Chuck a little bit faster. By the way, some of you will be wondering, why not run away from the red Gyarados? The answer is you are not allowed to. The game prevents you from doing that. You either have to catch it, knock it out, or use a Pokédoll, and using items in battle are banned in my challenges, so Pokédoll is off the table. I could potentially catch it as an HM user, but it has a low catch rate, so that would end up being just as risky as battling it. This is why I always defeat it, and that's why Chansey had problems. Now let's jump into this battle with the Rocket Executive. It's bad news whenever I'm talking about this fight, so yeah, it's bad news for Chansey. I am so sorry. In this case, she has Arbok, Gloom, and Murkrow. 3 truly awful Pokemon. You know what's another truly awful Pokemon in a solo format? Chansey. This thing is so bad. Luckily, it is not bad enough to lose to this Rocket Executive. Actually, nowhere close. Did I get you? I hope I got you. Anyways, there's a little bit more Rocket plotline left over. We've got Lance, he's got to do a whole bunch of talking. Then I have to defeat these Electrodes, which are kind of frustrating because Chansey takes multiple turns to knock them out. The second one even goes for self-destruct. I did want to show this to you because it does a lot of physical damage, but Chansey still has more than half health left over, and I went into that battle with imperfect health, so I don't need to heal for the next Electrode. Well, unless it uses Screech first, surviving, then using self-destruct on the second turn, dealing massive damage, knocking Chansey out. Okay, so there's a problem here. I win this fight because it was against a wild Pokemon, and I still have HM users in my party. Chansey did not win there though. The only reason I'm able to continue running is the fact that I have HM users. Otherwise, I would have blacked out and gone back to the Pokemon Center. Now, I do have the ability to mod the game so that if my Solomon faints, I black out right away and I never have to let my HM users faint. But for most battles, that feels like a little bit of a hack, because if I have HM users in my party, I should have to let them black out and take the time loss that would be required in order to black out. Otherwise, I should have to reset. Resetting is more time efficient if you just want to try the battle right again and you don't care about experience, because you don't have to let your HM users faint. In this case though, I have no choice to let my HM users faint. That means I will not lose the money from this blackout, and I can continue playing as if Chansey had won. I didn't feel like that was the right thing to do, so I ended up forcing myself to reset here, and that takes me back to in front of the red Gyarados. I have to fight it for a 3rd time in this run. Okay, Chansey's really bad. This thing is not fun to play. By the way, I'm having some flash forwards right now thinking about how this thing is going to do against Steven Stone. Anyway, I make it all the way through the Rocket plotline for a 2nd time. Can't believe I had to do that twice in a single playthrough. Anyway, let's take on Pryce. He's slower than he was with Blissey. That's essentially the story of Chansey. All of these fights are just a little bit more annoying, and sometimes you lose to Electrodes. Still though, rollout is pretty good once it gets established, and knock out the Piloswine, earning myself the Icy Wind TM, which of course I'm going to teach to both Chansey and Blissey right away. Ironically though, it's not very useful against the first trainer inside of Chuck's gym because he has Hitmonlee and, like I said before, good special defense. I get hit by Double Kick, which does about a 1/3 to Blissey. Luckily, Headbutt is still able to 2-shot. Knob's not difficult, neither is the guy with the Mankey line. They do have Low Kick. Blissey looks like it would be a Pokemon that would weigh a lot, but it doesn't actually weigh very much, only 100 pounds. Also, Low Kick doesn't deal weight-based damage in Generation 2. Okay, Chuck's next. I don't flinch the Primate, but it just misses Leer. Poliwrath comes out then, and Headbutt is doing about a 1/4. Maybe even less, it could be a 5-hit. Then it attacks with Dynamic Punch, and does less than half to Blissey. I guess I'm 11 levels over-leveled by this point. I flinch on the next turn, then Blissey hits itself, and Dynamic Punch lands for a 2nd time in a single fight. feels like that's unfair. One reset to Chuck's not the worst. In the next battle, I Mud Slap turn 1 to lower his accuracy. He misses Hypnosis. Then I recover the status condition with a Mint Berry. Poliwrath uses Mind Reader to lock on. Then I flinch, countering Mind Reader very effectively. It goes for Hypnosis, missing on the next turn, and I knock it out with a critical hit from Headbutt. Generally just a really messy, unskillful battle, but Blissey gets through, I guess. There's not really much I can do to make this better other than grinding up to a ridiculous level on wild Pokemon or inefficient trainers. Remember what I said before that Chansey's going to be going through the same section of the game at the same level? Yeah, that's happened now, so the training has all equalized out and it's also fighting Chuck at level 41. I have tried to compensate for this by teaching it Return for more damage in the place of Headbutt, but now I can't flinch Chuck's Pokemon. Also, he gets a critical hit with Dynamic Punch. And then in the second battle, he hits with Dynamic Punch, so it does the same amount of damage, bringing me down to low red health. Chansey then hits itself, and that's another loss. I do want everyone to remember, though, Chuck is bad. Eventually you will just win because he's going to miss all of his moves, like Hypnosis, Hypnosis again, Hypnosis for a third time, and then I knock out the Poliwrath. South of Goldenrod City, I pick up this nugget as well as a rare candy. Then in the department store, I sell all the items that I can. I was hoping that I could get close to buying Fire Blast, but I'm just nowhere near there. So it looks like I'm going to have to face Jasmine with Icy Wind and Mud Slap. This is not an ideal circumstance. Mud Slap is doing less than half to each of the Magnemites, so I'm probably going to have to win being paralyzed as well, unless the accuracy drops prevent the status condition in combination with the paralyzed Cure Berry. I knock out the first one status free, move on to the second one, go for Mud Slap, but here Blissey gets paralyzed. Alright, I think this is the first time in the playthrough that I'm going to use a special move, so we are using Icy Wind against the Steelix. Well, first it goes for Iron Tail and does a scary amount of damage, roughly 1/3. Icy Wind does the same amount to the Steelix, dropping its speed so that I can move first on the next turn. That's kind of funny. I take it down to orange health, but if she uses a Hyper Potion, I'm gonna lose. So I guess I should be using Soft Boiled, but if Iron Tail lowers my defense, I will lose. Luckily, it misses, then Jasmine uses a Hyper Potion. I start attacking again. Steelix crits with Iron Tail and brings Blissey down to red health. I go for Soft Boil again. Iron Tail misses twice in a row, giving me Icy Winds. Then Steelix uses Screech, giving me just the time I need to knock it out. Okay, another lucky win for Blissey. Chansey doesn't get the same amount of luck. Iron Tail's dropping its defense, and as a result it gets 1 reset against Jasmine. Although only 1, because I come back and I figured out that I can use a Mud Slap to lower the Steelix's accuracy so that Iron Tail is never attacking. This move already has bad accuracy. I figured only 1 Mud Slap was needed, and I was right. After that, using Icy Wind, I'm able to knock out Jasmine's ace. With her defeated, both Chansey and Blissey get a defense boost. This is much needed, but it's still not much of a boost. Blissey still only has 40 defense. In Radio Tower, Petrol's actually quite easy. I'm one-shotting most of his coughing with Icy Wind, and I have Soft Boiled to fall back on if I need to. This move stops becoming as useful though against the rival, because the Magnemite paralyzes Blissey, and then I get cursed by the Haunter. I end up in this awful scenario against the Sneasel of all Pokemon where I'm having to heal all the time with Soft Boiled just to get enough health to attack a single time. I do manage to knock it out, and from there I'm going to be using Icy Wind on the Meganium. I was hoping this is going to be a 2-hit because it's also using Body Slam and it gets a critical hit. Luckily for me, Blissey also gets a crit and Meganium goes down in a single turn. Okay, Claire for most Pokemon, especially normal types, is just spam Return or Headbutt and eventually win. But Blissey has 54 attack and 128 special attack. So I think spamming Icy Wind makes more sense here. Blissey is able to one-shot all 3 of the Dragonairs, so it's pretty consistent. I have to take my time against the Kingdra because I'm doing about 1/3, and Claire does have Hyper Potions. The thing is, unlike in Generation 1 where the AI can just use items whenever it wants, she can't do this, so if the Kingdra uses Hyper Beam, then she's locked into recharging on the next turn, and that's what happens here, giving Blissey a win. Okay, I'm breaking my formula here a little bit. We're going to continue with Blissey all the way until the Elite Four. The rival is once again problematic because of the Magneton setting up with Thunder Wave and then the Haunter using Curse. This time I do not get lucky enough to one-shot the Meganium, and I didn't try to go for Soft Boiled to stall out, so Blissey takes a reset here. Now I think the correct play is to stall with Soft Boiled, but in the next battle I get a critical hit and Meganium goes down. Okay, the rival was a little bit rough, but nowhere near as rough as when using Chansey. However, before we even get there, we need to talk about Petrol, because Icy Wind is not able to one-shot the Coughing. Actually, nowhere near close. This is the effect of having 40 less base special attack. The fact that I'm so far from knocking these Pokemon out in a single hit exposes Chansey to Smokescreen, Self-Destruct, and Sludge. I don't knock out the Wheezing, it goes for Explosion and decimates Chansey. In the next fight, I'm in an even worse scenario. I've had my accuracy lowered by 1 stage and Chansey is also poisoned. By the time I bring the Wheezing to lowish health, I go for Soft Boiled to try to recover my health, then it just uses Explosion and Chansey goes down again. I tried for a 3rd time, figuring that eventually I'm going to get through this with some luck, but no, I take a 3rd reset and have to recalibrate my strategy. I tried fighting some of the Rockets for experience, but this doesn't even bring Chansey up over level 45 to the next damage rounding threshold. I think what I should have done here is go through Ice Path, pick up the Nevermelt Ice, boost the damage of Icy Wind, and then come back and fight Petrol again. Instead, I just tried to battle him. Once again, Explosion, Chansey loses. The next time around though, I go for a different approach. Mod Slap the Wheezing so that it misses with Explosion while I heal with Soft Boiled. I don't like this strategy, but it ends up working. As a result, I pull through with Chansey and move on to the rival. This fight is so awful. The fact of the matter is, Chansey is just taking too much damage, Paralysis is awful, Soft Boiled is not healing enough, and Icy Wind doesn't do enough damage. Actually, nothing does enough damage. Chansey is just completely incompetent at dealing damage to other Pokemon. Please look at the timer right now. A lot of other species have completed the entire game by this point. Chansey is just truly dreadful. I take 2 resets against the rival, and then I head through Ice Path, picking up the Nevermelt Ice on the way. Do you think that this is going to make the rival easier? No, it's not. He is still going to be absolutely brutal. I take not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, but 5 resets to him, and each one of these takes a lot of time. I have spent almost 10 minutes trying to defeat him. It's at this point that I realized I'm just gonna have to train, so I'm gonna fight a bunch of random trainers around the region. At this point, Chansey is also wasting time in another way because it wants to evolve into Blissey, an animation that I need to cancel every single time it happens. No, I will not mod this out of the game. This is how the game works. I come back to the rival at level 50. I have to 2-shot the Golbat, and I take almost half damage in the process. Then I have to 2-shot the Magnemite, and I once again get paralyzed. However, I have new tech for this battle, Shadow Ball. Maybe this is going to let me knock out the Haunter more quickly so that I don't get cursed. Well, the answer is no, because I'm paralyzed. I'm going to get cursed, but at least I can knock it out without taking curse damage from the ghost. Next is Sneasel. Things slow down. I have to use Soft Boiled a bunch, and hopefully over time I'm going to finish it. I move on to the Meganium. It sets up Reflect. Icy Wind does half. This is largely why I was losing before. I was not able to do enough damage to it. This time around though, I can survive the curse damage, survive a Body Slam, and then Chansey finally defeats the rival. 17 resets so far, and 1 blackout. For Claire, I'm using Return on the Dragonairs. Crit number 1. Okay, I knock it out in 1 hit. Number 2, I don't get a crit, but it misses Thunder Wave. Then, number 3 paralyzes Chansey, but unless the Kingdra gets a critical hit, I should be fine. Chansey runs out of Return PP, delaying my win. I have to use Icy Wind to knock out the Kingdra. It takes some time, but eventually I pull through. I was so worried going into the next battle against the rival in Victory Road. I figured that this was going to be the same scenario as before. Paralysis from Magneton, Curse from Haunter, and then just barely not enough damage to 2-shot the Meganium. Although I was wrong. Body Slam brings Chansey down to red health, and my second Icy Wind does have what it needs. So no resets to the rival here. With that, both Chansey and Blissey are ready to take on the Elite Four. Kangaskhan is now going to catch up quickly. Against Pryce, it's able to one-shot the Seal, and then 2-shot the Dugong, getting a flinch along the way. We all know that Piloswine is not very good. In this case, it chooses Blizzard Missing, and that's that for the Ice-type specialist. Jasmine might be a little bit concerning if I'm not able to 2-shot the Steelix, or 1-hit the Magnemites. Luckily, I am able to take out her first Pokemon and avoid Thunder Wave in a single hit each. So, what about Steelix? In this case, Fire Punch does less than half, but Steelix's Iron Tails are only doing roughly 1/3. Also, my second Fire Punch gets a critical hit, so another easy gym battle. Petrol has the chance to be really annoying for Kangaskhan, at least at only level 37. I have not yet taught Return. I figured Headbutt would be enough, but I'm 2-shotting all the Coughing, so I can get hit by Smokescreen or Sludge, or in the worst case scenario, Self-Destruct or Explosion. But the Wheezing doesn't prioritize this move. I knock it out over 2 turns and just muscle my way through the remaining Coughing. Luckily, the rival in the underground does not confuse me with Golbat, instead choosing Wing Attack. I one-shot the Magnemite Bite, avoiding the paralysis status condition, and then I can use Bite for super effective damage on the Haunter. Now, this does not get the one hit, so it had a chance to use Curse if my Kangaskhan didn't inflict a flinch. This feels like Kangaskhan's signature secondary effect. It's just flinching with Headbutt and Bite all the time. Anyways, the rival's also easy, so unlike Chansey and Blissey, Kangaskhan gets through here without any bruises. Inside the department store, I pick up Protein and Carbos to improve my stats a little bit, but these are overall not super relevant for Kangaskhan. Although, I should be buying something else here. I'll talk about that in the follow-up playthrough. For now, though, I made this choice, so I'm going to have to live with it. Also, I'm going to teach Return in the place of Bite so that I have 2 normal type moves. I think that Headbutt's chance to flinch and the fact that it still does good damage means that I want to keep it around longer than having Bite for super effective damage against someone like Will. After all, I'm pretty sure using Return on him is going to be the better choice. And Return is definitely the correct choice against Claire. I can knock out all 3 of the Dragonairs in a single hit and then the Kingdra in 2 hits. I probably should go for Headbutt turn 1 here so that she doesn't use a Hyper Potion and also so I have a chance to flinch and avoid Smokescreen. Even without doing that though, she's still really easy. After completing the Dragon's Den with Kangaskhan, I had a choice to make. Do I want to go back to the Whirl Islands and Mount Mortar and grab those 2 rare candies, even though they take a lot of time? I decided against it. Oh, also, here at the entrance to the Dragon's Den, you can actually pick up a calcium. This is a vitamin I very rarely grab, but I think I'm going to start picking it up more in the future. Skipping the candies, I head to Victory Road, and right before I take on the rival, I grab the TM for Earthquake. I'm not going to teach this to Kangaskhan right away because I want Fire Punch for Koga and Ice Punch for Lance, plus I'm hanging on to Headbutt. I think the flinches are going to be important against Bruno's Machamp, but I think I'll be teaching Earthquake for physical damage, at least to speed up a little bit of Kanto. Okay, now time for the rival. Once again, this one is pretty easy, although the Magneton does survive a hit from Fire Punch, but it misses with Thunder Wave, so no paralysis. Once again, the Haunter survives a hit. This time, even after Curse, it hangs on, but that doesn't inflict damage because I'm moving first. So I can 1-hit the following Kadabra and then 2-hit the Meganium, even though it sets up Reflect. I take only a single turn of Curse damage in the process of all of this. Alright, let's face the Elite Four with all 3 of these normal types. For Kangaskhan, Will is really simple. He has 3 frail Pokemon, the 2 Xatu and the Jinx, and then 2 bulky Pokemon, the Exeggutor and the Slowbro. I 1-shot the frail Pokemon and 2-shot the bulky Pokemon. Koga's team can be thought as divided up into 3 groups of Pokemon. The Ariados and the Venomoth, 2 bug types, then the Fortress, which is usually very defensive, but I have Fire Punch to 1-shot it. And then his final 2 Pokemon, which are a little bit bulkier, Muck and Crobat. They generally survive 1 hit in these solo challenges. And that's exactly how this battle plays out for Kangaskhan. 3 1-hits at the beginning of the fight and then 2 2-hits at the end. Okay, so we've arrived in Bruno's chamber at level 49. Currently I have 4 rare candies, so before fighting the fighting type specialist, I am going to level up over 2 damage rounding thresholds to improve my damage as much as is possible. Against Bruno, if the solo Pokemon has strong physical damage, it is likely going to 1-hit all of the Hitmons. Only one of them has the ability to move first against fast Pokemon, that's Hitmonchan because it has Mach Punch which has higher priority. So in this case, I'm going to take a small amount of damage before moving on to Bruno's ace, Machamp. I make a misplay here choosing Ice Punch in case it froze. This is a bad call. I should have gone for Headbutt, which has a higher chance of messing the Machamp up on a single turn, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to 2-hit. Machamp lands a Cross Chop. As a result, it gets a critical hit because this move has an increased crit ratio. As a result, Kangaskhan faints and gets 1 reset. So what are my options to get by here? Well, let's see how much damage Return does to Machamp in a single hit. And the answer is it almost 1-shots. Machamp hangs on with a tiny amount of health. This time it misses Cross Chop. Bruno uses a Max Potion. I get to re-roll Return damage so we see how much it does with a slightly worse roll. Still, it's gonna be enough for a 2-hit, so the answer here is just Headbutt into Return. Bruno's ace falls. Onix is the only Pokemon left over. I use Ice Punch and 1-shot. Now there's a nice synergy here facing Bruno with a normal type. You take some damage from the Mach Punch off of Hitmonchan, and then you can skip healing before Karen and go into this fight slightly damaged. This lowers the odds that the Umbreon is going to choose Sand Attack on turn 1, and if it doesn't, the fight becomes much easier. In this case, we can see that playing out. It chooses Confuse Ray and then starts using Feint Attack instead of lowering my accuracy. I knock it out. I have less than half health, but I'm able to 1-shot the following Vileplume, avoiding Stun Spore. I've made things a little bit more difficult on myself for the Gengar. Without Earthquake, I am not able to knock it out in a single hit. Luckily, even though it goes for Curse, I'm not worried if I take it out and take no damage from this volatile status condition, because I have Return, which is able to 1-shot both the Murkrow and the Houndoom. and without my accuracy lowered, there's no way for them to attack. Okay, it's time to take on the champion. And remember when I said I should have bought different vitamins? Yeah, I really should have purchased calcium to improve the damage of Ice Punch. Kangaskhan is able to two-shot the Gyarados. I used Headbutt just in case. And then we see the damage range with Ice Punch against the Dragonite. This is when I'm holding the Nevermelt Ice. I'm not able to one-shot. Luckily, I freeze, so it's not able to use Thunder Wave. He sends in his next Dragonite. This time, I get a much better damage roll, I guess. I knock it out in one hit, so there's a chance. Aerodactyl's next. I two-shot. It chooses Hyper Beam, doing very little damage. I'm able to use Return to one-shot the following Charizard, and I move on to the final Dragonite. So even though my damage ranges are not ideal here, I still am going to pull through on my first attempt. Outrage does very little, and Kangaskhan knocks out the Ace Dragonite. It gets a champion split of 54 minutes and 27 seconds. Okay, time to go back to the painful Pokemon. Are you ready for this? So Will's team has one major flaw when you're using a Chansey or a Blissey, a Pokemon that has outrageous HP, and that is his Exeggutor. It knows Leech Seed, which drains a percentage of your health every turn. In the case of Blissey or Chansey, the total number of HP that this is going to drain every turn is a massive amount. Also, the Pokemon that follows Exeggutor is Slowbro, and it loves to set up with either Amnesia or Curse, meaning that Blissey and Chansey are going to do very little damage, and after Leech Seed heals the Slowbro, it goes back to full health. I've seen scenarios like this play out before in Pokemon games when I was using Wailord in Emerald earlier this year. In this case, I think the only way I beat the Slowbro is I get subsequent critical hits over and over again to do enough damage. But even then, I'm not sure I would pull through. It is healing so much every turn. As a result, I cut my losses and reset quickly. What I'm hoping for this time is that I can flinch the Exeggutor and then use Icy Wind to knock it out on the next turn. While it doesn't flinch, it just chooses Egg Bomb and then goes down. So now that I've bypassed Leech Seed, the remainder of the fight becomes easier. Even though Slowbro takes forever to knock out, I have to chip away at it. Eventually I make it to the final Xatu and knock it out over 2 turns. Against Koga, the problems continue. There are 2 main threats: the Fortress using Explosion, and then any of his other Pokemon choosing Toxic. I'm not able to knock out his Pokemon quickly enough with Blissey, so Toxic stacking up every turn is going to be a death sentence. I take a quick reset, come back into the battle. This time Venomoth just confuses Blissey and I knock it out. From there I have to take 5 turns to defeat the Fortress. I was so worried it was going to explode, but instead it just keeps using Swift. Then I take things slow against the Muck using Mud Slap, hopefully lowering the chance that it's going to use Toxic. After that I knock it out with Icy Wind and move on to the Crobat. So I have made it this far. Now his Ace loves to use Double Team and Toxic as a combo. If your Pokemon is poisoned, Koga is essentially just going to spam Double Team over and over again, which gets really frustrating. Luckily, Icy Wind is doing a lot of damage, and I am able to finish the Crobat without the status condition affecting Blissey. Alright, Bruno, we're arriving here at level 55. I'm honestly not liking my odds. I'm going to use all 7 rare candies I have collected to this point to go up to level 62 to give myself the best possible chance I have against him. Okay, so will I one-shot the Hitmontop and the Hitmonlee? The answer is, if I'm using Icy Wind, definitely not. I take some damage from Dig, move on to the Hitmonlee, and then choose Headbutt. Luckily, I get a flinch, but there's no way I'm one-shotting. That exposes both Blissey and Chansey to Double Kick and High Jump Kick, and that's before the Hitmonchan comes out and uses Mach Punch, doing a decent amount of damage. And since I have to 2-hit, it's going to attack me twice, leaving Blissey with just over half health by the time the Machamp comes in. I'm not really sure what I was thinking here. I should be going for Headbutt for flinches. I choose Icy Wind instead, using special damage. Machamp cross chops, and surprisingly, Blissey hangs on with 1 hit point. If I can flinch the Machamp, I might be able to win, although I don't, so it gets me on the next turn. In the next battle, things start out worse because the Hitmonlee uses High Jump Kick, doing a massive amount of damage. Thing is, on the Hitmonchan, I can use Soft Boiled over and over again and recover my health to near full by the time the Machamp comes in. And there's an additional way to play this strategy that makes it a little bit more effective. If I choose Mud Slap against the Hitmonchan in combination with Soft Boiled, then I can lower its accuracy and have it not use Mach Punch. That means Blissey can arrive at the Machamp with full health. Does this give me what I need to survive a critical hit from Cross Chop? And the answer is no. Machamp still gets Blissey. However, Mud Slap in combination with Soft Boiled gets me back to the Machamp at full health. This time around, I flinch it 2 times in a row. Bruno uses a max potion, then I attack twice in a row, bringing it back down to low health. It chooses Cross Chop, missing, and as a result, Blissey knocks it out. Last is Onix, and Icy Wind takes care of it. The fight against Karen is quite annoying. I'm utilizing Mud Slap here once again to hopefully lower the chance that the Umbreon hits me with subsequent sand attacks, and it doesn't even get a single one in. It takes quite some time to knock out though. Next is Vileplume. Icy Wind cannot one-shot. Luckily, it doesn't land a Stun Spore. Gengar then slows things down even more with Curse. I have to use a bunch of Soft Boiled on both the Murkrow and the Houndoom. Here, Blissey's massive special defense really comes through for me because the Houndoom's attacks are all special: Pursuit, Flamethrower, and Crunch. So even though the fight goes slowly, eventually Blissey pulls through with a win. Lance has 2 potential ways to beat Blissey: strong physical moves like Hyper Beam, or potentially using Thunder Wave, messing me up a lot with the status condition and then eventually knocking me out. Although I think the second one is slightly less likely just because Soft Boiled is so good at recovering health. Icy Wind is also able to one-shot both of the Dragonites that have Thunder Wave, so that ends up not being a threat. The only way I could lose here then is strong physical moves. Luckily, even Hyper Beam from the Aerodactyl in this case isn't doing much. I can just heal with Soft Boiled and continue through the fight. Overall, pretty straightforward, eventually just attack and defeat all of Lance's Pokemon. However, I'm gonna remind everyone, Blissey is not getting a good time. It has a Lance split of 1 hour, 31 minutes, and 30 seconds. But of course, things get yet more painful because we have to do the league with Chansey. In this case, the Executor just chooses Egg Bomb and misses a bunch. Very convenient for me, so I pull through against Will on my first attempt. Unfortunately though, I run into some poison shenanigans against Koga's Venomoth once again, then Fortress uses Explosion and finishes Chansey. By the way, in my ROMs I have one small modification, which makes it so that the enemy's AI always sees it as if my team is only a single Pokemon. The Fortress otherwise will not choose to use Explosion, so if you're doing your own solo challenges and you're wondering why it never goes for this move, that's why. Yes, I am making things artificially harder on my solo Pokemon, but that's entirely because I don't want the HM users in my party to influence how these battles go. And I could deposit my HM users before every single fight, but that is just tedious and not fun, and we get to test things in the more difficult scenario by implementing this one small modification. The only other battle that really affects is against Morty, where he is not going to choose to use Mean Look, instead prioritizing actually useful moves like Hypnosis, Curse, or potentially Dream Eater or Shadow Ball. On my second attempt, I am able to defeat the Fortress. This time it does not choose Explosion. It just has a chance of choosing it apparently when it goes to low health. Maybe it's like 50-50, something like that. In this case, just like with Blissey, it spams Swift and that gives Chansey the win. Okay, 7 rare candies before Bruno. Chansey has arrived here at a higher level, 58. Hopefully that's going to give me what I need. I'm level 65 to take on the Fighting type specialist. Hitmonlee goes down, dealing some damage with Double Kick. Then Hitmonchan comes out and I don't have access to the Mud Slap strategy because I have Shadow Ball instead. That means I'm going to have to go up against the Machamp with lower overall health. I choose Return, and it does what looks like less than half. That made me so concerned. Cross Chop deals massive damage to Chansey, but it hangs on with 34 hit points. I choose Return again, seeing if I can get the 2-shot, and the answer is no. Turns out Chansey has a role for this. In the next battle, Return does slightly more damage, Cross Chop misses, and my second Return knocks the Machamp out. With that, I Icy Wind the Onix and move on to Karen. It looks like I arrived there at the perfect level. Anything lower than 65 would have made Bruno brutal. Just like with Blissey, I go into the Karen fight with sub-perfect health. This way the Umbreon just spams Feint Attack, I knock it out for free. Vileplume does not choose to go for Stun Spore, instead prioritizing Acid, which is something I rarely see. It's usually choosing Stun Spore or Petal Dance, and sometimes Moonlight if it's at low health. I had never really clued into the fact that it even had Acid. I guess that's because the Poison type move with physical damage is doing more damage than Petal Dance would be. Your Pokemon has to have a truly wild stat distribution to make that the case. For Gengar, I have Shadow Ball. I am able to 2-shot, and it goes for Spite instead of Curse, giving me an easy and fast time against both the Murkrow and the Houndoom. Last is Lance, and overall the league has not been that brutal with Chansey. Now, I don't have the damage ranges I need to one-shot the Dragonites, and I miss with my first Icy Wind anyway. As a result, I get paralyzed, and the remainder of the fight is a bit annoying. I have to use Soft Boiled to heal, but eventually I'm able to pull through because Lance's Pokemon just aren't able to do enough damage. Chansey gets a Lance split of 1 hour, 55 minutes, and 32 seconds. Okay, hilarious comparison. Phanpy and Larvitar were able to beat Red faster than Chansey beat Lance in its first run. Also, Chansey is only 8 seconds faster than Onyx's final playthrough time, so yeah, this is not going well so far. I can't wait until the second runs where I get access to hidden power with these Pokemon. Okay, but things are going to get better right away because in Goldenrod City, I can use the Move Tutor to teach one of the moves, Flamethrower, Thunderbolt, or Ice Beam. Since I already have an Ice-type move, I don't think Ice Beam is the right choice. I also don't have enough money to buy both of the remaining 2 moves, so I have to pick and choose. In this case, I decide on Flamethrower, and I teach it in the place of Mud Slap. In Kanto, as soon as I arrive in Saffron City, I pick up the TM for Psychic, which I teach in the place of Headbutt. I'm going to talk about one of the gym leaders. In this case, I think I may have made a small mistake not going with Thunderbolt, because Flamethrower is technically neutral against the Lapras on Misty's team, but still it's not able to do half damage. She then sets up Rain Dance, lowering its damage, gets another turn, uses Perish Song, and as a result, Blissey has 1 reset here. In the next battle, I just get luckier because the Lapras doesn't choose Perish Song. I am using Psychic, which I guess is slightly better because it could lower special defense. It doesn't. I still take 3 turns to knock it out before I move on to Misty's Ace. Starmie's not a problem, although I have to take my time using Psychic against it, which is resisted. The remainder of Kanto, just as you would expect, is all very simple. I have Icy Wind for Brock, Psychic for Blaine and Janine, and so now let's go up against Blue. This is another battle in Crystal version where one of the enemy Pokemon has Leech Seed, the Executor. Luckily, I have Flamethrower, so I'm hoping that I'm going to knock it out very quickly. I have to take my time against the Gyarados that precedes it. I'm using Psychic, trying to lower special defense and knock it out fairly quickly. Blue is also refusing to let this Pokemon faint, spamming full restores. Finally, it goes down and I move on to the Grass-type Pokemon. Now, the Rain from the Gyarados is still in play, so using Flamethrower is not going to be the best choice here. Instead, I have to use Icy Wind. It does more than half. Executor chooses Egg Bomb, and I knock it out. Last is Arcanine. Psychic doesn't look like it's quite going to be able to 2-shot, so I do chip damage with Icy Wind, preventing Blue from using a full restore, and then I finish it with Psychic on the next turn. With the fast growth rate, Blissey is arriving in Red's area at level 67, and almost 68, which is over a damage rounding threshold. So I'm going to fight some wild Pokemon here, level up to 68, and then use my rare candies. By the way, you might have picked up on this in the footage, but I didn't when doing this voiceover. I actually used my rare candies prior to Bruno during the first fight, but for the second fight, I went back in at only level 55, saving all of my rare candies. So I have 10 available right now before Red. Using all of them brings Blissey up to level 78, and now, without using Curse, I am going to try the final boss of Pokemon Crystal. Okay, so check this out. Flamethrower is not able to one-shot the Pikachu, but I knock it out over 2 turns, and Red is going to use full restores here. This is a small quirk of his AI script. He will never use healing items on Pokemon that aren't his lead. As a result, the Pikachu is the only Pokemon that can get these healing items, and he does have more than one. However, he doesn't use them because I get a critical hit on the next turn and knock out his lead. Now, it's time for the Espeon. It sets up with Reflect, which is absolutely useless when I'm going to be spamming Flamethrower and Icy Wind. It takes me 3 turns to knock out the Psychic type and move on to the Snorlax. This is where things against Red get really awful, with so many Pokemon, especially special attackers. The fact that Snorlax likes to use Amnesia to set up its special defense means moves like Flamethrower will just do pathetic amounts of damage. However, I want you to observe what's happening here. Snorlax is prioritizing using Body Slam, and I also burn it with Flamethrower, so I'm dealing a little bit more chip damage every turn. And it has not gone for Amnesia. Plus, Blissey is faster, and eventually I get it to low health. Because of how the turns have been ordered, it doesn't choose Rest fast enough, and I knock it out. Now, people always accuse me of being biased about Curse, Protect, and Return strategies here against Red, and in most cases I'm going to push back against that because I don't think I am. Always behind the scenes I try additional strategies and they just don't work. It ends up being the case that Return and Curse are just the best option for most Pokemon here. In this case though, with the luck that I just got against Snorlax, Blissey is going to be able to pull this off without Curse. I take my time. Venusaur I have Flamethrower for. Against the Charizard I have to be slower using Psychic and Soft Boiled together. Last is Blastoise. I have to use Psychic here once again, but it's not able to do enough damage to me because again, Blissey's special defense is outrageous. Okay, so Blissey pulls through with a win and gets a final time in its first playthrough of 1 hour 54 minutes and 50 seconds, with 13 resets, 0 blackouts at level 79. This is a game time of 6 hours and 54 minutes. Up until this point in the run, Chansey has been worse worse than Blissey as we would expect, but it's not been significantly worse. But all of that is gonna change now. I really suffer against Blue. He does use Leech Seed here, and then I just can't knock the Arcanine out. In the next battle, the Gyarados crits with Hyper Beam, finishing Chansey. And then in the third battle, once again Leech Seed lands, and this ruins my day against the Arcanine. Look at how much damage it is healing every turn. At least a third? The only way that I'm going to possibly win this, if I've been hit by Leech Seed, is to lower the Arcanine's special defense using Psychic, and then knock it out with other special moves. I was not sure if I would have enough Soft Boileds to heal my health in that case, and if I run out of Psychic PP and can't lower Arcanine's special defense anymore, then it's just going to out-heal me, and I'm never going to knock it out. However, there is another way to win, which feels kind of like cheating. I wasn't sure what to do here. The Arcanine switches me out with Roar. As a result, I can send Chansey back in, and the volatile status condition is now healed. Since I have already defeated the Executor, there's no way for him to inflict Leech Seed again, and as a result, I can knock the Arcanine out. In order to stay coherent with all of my other videos in this series, whenever I get roared out, the rule that I have for myself is that I just have to switch my Pokemon back in. I do want to mention that the Arcanine choosing to use Roar is extremely rare. Actually, I think it's extremely rare because it ran out of PP with extreme speed, and then it was like, what else should I do? This Chansey is amazing defensively. I'm not going to be choosing Swift or Flamethrower, so let's roar it out and fight something else. It's kind of a ridiculous scenario. I'm not really proving anything by winning in this way, but I wouldn't prove anything by winning the other way, which is just waiting till the Executor doesn't choose Leech Seed, because I don't want to level up more for this fight with Chansey. Anyway, I totally get it if you feel like this is cheating. In the end, it's my first playthrough. I'm going to have to come back and do this battle again, and in that case, I'm not going to be able to rely on Roar. One thing I did with Chansey that I didn't pull off with Blissey was I held the Amulet coin throughout all of Kanto so that I can return to Johto right before Red and teach it another special move. In this case, Thunderbolt, which I put in the place of Icy Wind. Since Psychic is already super effective against the Venusaur, and now I have Thunderbolt, which is going to be super effective against the Charizard. Prior to Bruno, I used rare candies. So with Chansey, I only have 3 remaining. I go from level 75 up to 78 before taking on Red. Now, for anyone who accuses me for favoring return, curse, and rest strategies at the end of the game, I have this example for you. By the way, I'm a little bit salty about this because I read one of the comments yesterday after seeing the comments on my Snorlax Tauros and Miltank video, which just premiered yesterday. At least for me, the time is all kind of wonky because we've been preparing these videos for a long time to ensure that this end of the year could be as hype as possible. Anyway, I am genuinely trying these fights with other strategies. Like in this case with Chansey, Blissey did really well with only special moves, so I figured I can do the same thing with Chansey. And I get punished so hard for making this decision. The Snorlax feels like it is near impossible to knock out using special moves. I want you to watch this footage of it after it chooses Amnesia once. Look at how much damage my Psychic does. By the way, I am choosing Psychic because I know that this move is going to lower its special defense and hopefully give me more damage. Actually, I don't mean watch this footage because in this case we just get paralyzed and then the Snorlax finishes us without Chansey ever getting a chance to attack. Okay, next battle against Red. Check out how much damage Psychic does. This is before Amnesia. It's pathetic, honestly. Then it sets up with Amnesia, and I'm doing even less. Now, Chansey is terrible in comparison with Blissey. Once again, I will bemoan the fact that it has 40 less base special attack. So in this case, the special strategies are just not going to work. Honestly, I did try to make them work. I came back with Ice Beam. I even tried to freeze the Snorlax to get an easy win, but the fact that I am knocking it out so slowly gives it a chance every turn to roll for the 10% to defrost. Normally, Snorlax just defrosts and then you can't freeze it fast enough again, it uses rest, and all of your work is for nothing. I reset so many times trying to make this special strategy work against Red. It was extremely frustrating. In the end, I am trying to use rest in combination with all these moves so I can heal the status condition because paralysis kept messing me up, but even this just gives Snorlax more time to defrost. Okay, so let's talk about Curse because this move is definitely not the best move in the game. It's not the best move against Red in every scenario. There are a lot of cases where you want to do something else. For some examples, I recommend you checking out either Scissor, Scyther, or Cleavor, which I'll just use Swords Dance. Also, Pinsir and Heracross used alternative strategies. Pinsir uses the Swords Dance strategy, whereas Heracross used Endure and Reversal together in order to sweep Red's team. Other alternatives are my Abra video or my Mr. Mime video. Both of those Pokemon didn't fare very well when choosing to use Curse. But with normal types, they are caught in an awful position. Normally, their speed stats are not great, an example of that is Ursaring, or they have a bad growth rate, like Tauros, Miltank, and Snorlax. So you arrive here with low damage, and then even though your speed is fantastic, you're just not able to knock out Red's Pokemon quickly enough. And compounding this is the fact that most of the normal types don't have outrageous special defense stats. So if they're not able to set up and they're just trying to sweep, they won't be able to do it fast enough, getting hit by a bunch of special attacks from Espeon, Venusaur, Charizard, and Blastoise. Complicating all of this, if you have low defense, then the Snorlax is absolutely awful. Curse comes in and it solves a majority of these problems. If you have low speed, then it doesn't matter already, you might as well set up your defense, then it makes you more defensive against the Snorlax, allowing you to survive longer there and knock it out over time. Plus it improves your physical attack so that you deal good damage to the Snorlax after it chooses Amnesia. None of this solves the problem of low special defense. In those cases, Pokemon often need to train more or take an alternative strategy into Red to be successful, but Chansey doesn't need to do this. So in the end of all of this, after trying many times, taking a total of 35 resets in this run, I come back and face Red with Curse, Return, Rest, and Soft Boiled. Why am I running 2 recovery moves with leftovers? Well, the answer is pretty simple. Rest is to get rid of paralysis, Soft Boiled is to heal if I don't have paralysis. I only need to attack with Return because luckily Red does not have any Steel or Ghost type Pokemon. Right now I'm actually imagining if they switched out one of his Pokemon like Venusaur, which is typically his worst Pokemon, for a Pokemon like Steelix or Gengar. That would make this fight extremely awful, and it would definitely make Curse and Return as a pair much less effective in this fight. Earthquake isn't really a possibility as a one move solves everything since Charizard has the flying type. Anyway, in this case, and it's going to be disappointing for a lot of you, I'm sure people are going to write in the comments that I'm biased, but in this case with Chansey, using Curse and Return together, I am able to defeat Red on my first attempt using this strategy. So with Chansey at least, it is the superior strategy. Okay, are you ready for Kangaskhan to style on both of these Pokemon? Check this out. We're at Blue. I still have the same moveset that I had during the fight against Lance. I am just sweeping through everything. I don't really need Earthquake. I can just use Ice Punch for the Rhydon. In this case, I get a freeze. Gyarados takes some time. He uses a bunch of full restores, but eventually Return gets the knockout. From there, I don't have to worry about the Executor's Leech Seed. I just two-shot. After that, his Arcanine. In this case, Return gets a critical hit and Blue is defeated. Okay, once again, I'm going to prove to all of you that I don't only use curse strategies. With Kangaskhan, I'm going to leverage the fact that this Pokemon is a female. I use 3 rare candies, bringing it up to level 67, and then I go up against Red. My moveset is Return, Dynamic Punch, Attract, and Headbutt. Thank you, Snowy, for figuring out that this strategy can work. Return one-shots the Pikachu. Then on Espeon, I go for Headbutt, getting a critical hit, knocking it out in one turn as well. That was supposed to be a 2-hit, and I probably should have used Attract there to play a little bit safer. Now for the Snorlax, I am going to use Attract, making it only have a 50% chance to be able to attack me. Plus when it's at high health, it's going to be choosing Amnesia, which doesn't help when I can use Dynamic Punch to 2-shot. And I don't even have to rely on this move's low accuracy. Once it lands once and inflicts confusion, then I can use Headbutt, which stacks the flinch chance alongside the Attract chance for it to not move and the chance for it to hit itself in confusion. This completely destroys Snorlax. Next is Venusaur. I use Return, followed by Headbutt, to try and flinch it and avoid Solar Beam, but I don't. After that is Charizard. I make it attracted to Kangaskhan, and then knock it out using Headbutt. Let's just do a little bit of math. What is the chance for Red's Pokemon to attack when they're both infatuated and I'm using Headbutt with the chance to flinch? So they have a 50% chance to move through Attract, and then they have a 70% chance to move through Headbutt. So on every given turn, Red's Pokemon only have a 35% chance to attack. That is worse than Morty's Hypnosis odds. Blastoise comes out even though I'm low health. I use Attract. It does hit one Surf, bringing me to low health, but then I start flinching over and over again. As a result, Blastoise goes down and Kangaskhan defeats Red in its first battle. It gets a first playthrough time of 1 hour, 10 minutes, and 45 seconds, with 6 resets, 0 blackouts at level 68. Just one short of perfection. Anyway, this is with a game time of 4 hours and 27 minutes. Okay, here's how the first playthroughs stack up against each other in terms of timeline performance. Look at what happens when I tried to use the special strategy with Chansey against Red. Bad things happened. Also, with how much further Chansey was behind Blissey, it makes Kangaskhan's lead look not that significant significant, these Pokemon seem kind of evenly spaced throughout time. Although, Kangaskhan got a ridiculous first playthrough time. Looking at the tier list, when I did repeated playthroughs, and I mean repeated playthroughs with Tyranitar, trying to get its time as good as possible, I was able to achieve a time of 1 hour 10 minutes and 54 seconds. Kangaskhan, in a first messy run without hidden power, was able to beat this time. For follow-up playthroughs, I'm going to start with Blissey, and we're going to use this as a lens to examine Chansey's chances as well. Because, like I said before, these Pokemon play very similarly, and that's going to remain true in the follow-up runs. What this really means is that Chansey's name is 100% accurate. It just relies on more chance when compared with Blissey. I sat down with Snowy to optimize these runs. I figured that was on theme, since I also sat down with them earlier in the year to talk about Kangaskhan's optimized playthrough. And I have essentially just stolen their strategy for my video, so go and watch that interview as well as Snowy's video to get more detailed insight into Kangaskhan. For now, let's go through Blissey and see how much time I was able to shave off of its ridiculous playthrough. First of all, the most annoying fight in this entire run is against Bugsy. This is true for both Chansey and Blissey. It feels like they're both about even here as well. I'm using Pound, Growl, Tail Whip, and Soft Boil to defeat him. I am also holding the Poison Cure Berry just to counter out Kakuna's poison whenever that happens. Really, what has to happen is the Scyther needs to miss a Fury Cutter. It doesn't matter how you play this fight, eventually that has to happen. There is one potential alternative, but I don't really like it, and that is to use Flash. Blinding the Scyther means that it's more likely to miss with Fury Cutters, but then Flash is going to be on my moveset until I beat the Rockets in Radio Tower and unlock the move deleter in Blackthorn City. This is just not a great way to play for the remainder of the run. Also, Blissey and Chansey are both exploring Sprout Tower, so they do have access to Flash, but the fact that it only has 70% accuracy is also a big drawback of this approach. And while this strategy is more consistent against Bugsy alone, it doesn't mean that the current strategy of using Growl can't win on my first attempt. I think this way of playing gives me a little bit more flexibility later into the game, plus it allows me to have high risk reward here against Bugsy, but there's also the chance that I get some resets. It's annoying when these happen, and I restarted the run so many times to try and get a clean Bugsy, but I just couldn't pull it off. So eventually I had to go with 5 resets against him, which doesn't feel great. I think if I came back to do this one again, I would run Flash for Bugsy and just deal with a constrained moveset in the mid-game. Okay, Goldenrod. In this section of the game, I experimented with trying to get Fire Blast before Whitney to have a special move, but this does not work out in terms of time. Rollout is just far more effective against her. Now that we're in the mid-game proper, this is where everything changes for these two Pokemon. Well, that's what I expected, because I now have access to Hidden Power. Going with Hidden Power Ice, which is the best special typing to have in Generation 2, doesn't make a lot of sense when Blissey already gets access to Icy Wind. I want more special moves to have more special type coverage, so in this case I'm going to go with Hidden Power Psychic. The reason is it gives good coverage against Chuck and Bruno, and it also helps against a bunch of random NPCs that have poison types and normal types, that kind of stuff. I don't have to rely on Headbutt as much. Also, running this move makes the mid-game a little bit more efficient because I can take on Chuck right away and get Fly. Even with Hidden Power Psychic, this is not a guarantee, and there is a slim chance that I don't two-shot the Poliwrath. Blissey has a 92.8% chance to get the two-shot. Now, there are some really unfortunate resets in this playthrough. When I'm fighting Pryce, I get frozen by Blizzard, and this does allow the Piloswine to defeat Blissey once. Anyway, with him out of the way, I head back to Goldenrod City, sell a bunch of items, and this gives me enough money to buy the Fire Blast TM, which I'm going to use for Jasmine. It gives Blissey one-shots on all of her Pokemon. Now, this playthrough still does have some problems. I'm holding the Amulet coin, trying to earn myself more tutor moves, but then I run into Paralysis, Confusion, and Curse on the rival and get one reset prior to the league. It's easy to solve this, just hold a Paralyzed Cure Berry, but I figured it didn't need it, and micromanaging my held item wastes a lot more time than just setting and forgetting an Amulet coin for this stage of the game. Getting the Fire Blast TM really helps both Chansey and Blissey against Will because we can one-shot the Executor. Before Bruno with Blissey, I use all 7 rare candies, going up to level 61. Still, this does not give Hidden Power Psychic one-hits on any of the Hitmons. Remember, they have really good special defense. In this case, I have a 13.8% chance to knock them all out in one hit. There is a small damage range with a regular hit that doesn't crit to knockout. Beyond that, let's look at damage ranges from Mach Punch and Cross Chop. Mach Punch does between 17 and 20% damage to Blissey, and Cross Chop does between 60 and 71%. That means even with max rolls from both of these moves, Blissey is going to survive. But if I take damage from the Hitmonlee and the Hitmontop, then there's the chance that I can lose. In this case, I arrive at the Machamp with good health. I'm able to survive the cross chop and knock it out over 2 turns. Both Karen and Lance are straightforward as they were in the previous playthroughs, so now let's talk about the end of the game. Leading into that, even holding the amulet coin for a significant period of time does not give me enough money to buy both tutor moves. I would have had to give up Fire Blast earlier to make that happen. So for the late game, my moveset is going to be Psychic, Thunderbolt, Fire Blast, and Soft Boiled, at least for the section in Kanto. Once again, Fire Blast helps against blue because I can one-shot the Executor and avoid Leech Seed. With him out of the way, then I have to switch up my Blissey moveset. Now, I really tried to make the special set work with Blissey's higher special attack stat, but I could not pull it off in testing. I lost over and over against Red's Snorlax when I wasn't getting lucky with burns. So in the late game with Blissey, I have to revert to the generic strategy: Return, Rest, Curse, and Soft Boiled. It's a bit disappointing, but I can set up on the Pikachu, so overall this is very consistent. I can heal Paralysis when I need to. Blissey doesn't really care about speed, it can tank all of the moves that Red throws at it, and eventually it clocks in with its second playthrough time of 1 hour 38 minutes and 27 seconds, with 9 resets, 0 blackouts at level 74. This is a game time of 6 hours and 2 minutes. Now, Chansey plays almost identically, so I'm going to take some time here to talk about the items that I'm picking up in order to be able to afford Fire Blast before Jasmine in both of these runs. There are the standard high-priced items: the charcoal from Azalea Town, the nugget in the Miltank Field, the nugget that's in the Rocket Hideout, the protein in the Hideout, the goldenrod nugget that's south of the city, the HP up from Burned Tower, and the PP up in Violet City. This totals to roughly 35,000 Pokédollars. When chatting with Snowy about this, Snowy pointed out that there's a bunch of items inside of Mount Mortar that can be collected for additional money. That brings in a PP up, a Carbos, and also an additional nugget. To earn even more money, I can go to the Whirl Islands, collecting 1 more nugget as well as a calcium. All of this sold with the TMs throughout the playthrough gives Chansey enough money to get the Fire Blast TM. Now this run seems pretty messy. There are just so many moments where things can go wrong for Chansey. I've illustrated most of them with Blissey and the former playthroughs, but here's one I didn't talk about. Inside Dragon's Den, I'm trying to use Soft Boiled, I'm paralyzed, I can't, so the trainer at the entrance with his single Dragonair is able to knock out Chansey because he gets a critical hit with Slam. I took a blackout here. It did not make sense to reset before Claire. With Chansey, I end up getting a little bit risky against Bruno going into this fight at level 61. At level 65, I have a guaranteed 2-shot on the Machamp, but at this level, it's going to be a 3-hit. Playing in this way has some good upside though, because I beat Bruno pretty quickly, having only 2 resets. So overall, this is faster than I would have been if I leveled up more. Things get really bad against Karen though. I have so many unlucky fights against her, and I lose a bunch of times before I make it to Lance. Luckily, he's essentially free. By the time I make it to Blue, I had made a small mistake in this playthrough and I had deleted Fire Blast, so I no longer have it for the Executor. This is frustrating. I have to revert to a curse strategy here, but it ends up working pretty well. Now, this is a sloppy follow-up playthrough, I will admit, but Chansey is really bad. Hopefully you can understand why I didn't want to grind a ton of runs with this thing. Even though my follow-up playthrough ends up with 17 resets, it is dramatically better than my first playthrough. Chansey clocks in with a time of 2 hours, 1 minute, and 47 seconds. At level 76 with a game time of 6 hours and 52 minutes. This is fine, and I normally would say 4 now, but I don't know when I'm gonna go back and run Chansey again. I really don't want to. This Pokemon is not fun to play with in Generation 2. Maybe, just maybe, it's gonna be better in Gen 3. I don't think so. I think it's gonna be even worse in Gen 3. Anyway, now onto the fun stuff with Kangaskhan. This is Snowy's route. I think it is fantastic, and it's basically minimum battles for large portions of the run. Although there's one exception to that, which is mostly in the early game, because here you want to battle some additional trainers to get Kangaskhan to level 20 before Whitney. Outspeeding the Miltank is critical, as we saw before. Also in the early game, I'm going to draw your attention to moments like this where I'm using Leer. This is to save Comet Punch PP because this move is terrible. If it misses too many times or gets 2 hits too many times in a row, then you can just run out of PP and be trapped having to use Struggle. In those cases, it makes more sense to restart. But to prevent this sort of thing from happening, you can just use Leer. I also have to utilize Leer against Bugsy because Comet Punch isn't very good against the Scyther. I want to drop its defense once and then attack it. I had so many playthroughs just end during this battle because Comet Punch doesn't do enough damage, Fury Cutter stacks up, and then Bugsy knocks out Kangaskhan. And I am not saving up until this point in the run. run. I'm not going to be saving as aggressively as Snowy, and I will take resets before red. However, taking one here against Bugsy really didn't make much sense to me, so I restarted this run many times. At level 20, Kangaskhan stomps Whitney, and then we head into the mid game. For this, I have chosen Hidden Power Ground. It is by far the best for Kangaskhan. It solves so many issues: the rival's Haunter and Magnemite, then Morty's entire team. The one spot in the run where I was expecting to have roughly one reset in most playthroughs is against Chuck. The battle is kind of random, and I'm fighting him early into the run so that I'm not wasting time in the mid game walking around when I could be using Fly. The upside here is that the resets to Chuck are very quick, just like Surge in Pokemon Yellow. So even when things go wrong, Kangaskhan doesn't lose that much time. For Pryce, just spam Headbutt. Then for Jasmine, I am going to grab Fire Punch from the department store and teach it in the place of Bite. This gives me a solution for her Steelix, although I make one small mistake here. I should be using the Charcoal to boost the damage of Fire Punch. Without it, I'm more likely gonna 3-hit if I don't get a burn, and that makes things very close for Kangaskhan, although it pulls through with 1 hit point, so I won anyway. In the end, this is actually a slightly more concise play because I didn't have to go to Azalea Town to pick up the Charcoal, so I guess Kangaskhan today gets a small time advantage as a result of my mistake. Now during the Rocket plotline, I upgrade Mega Punch to Return. This is essentially my final moveset until Lance. Return, Hidden Power Ground, Headbutt, and Fire Punch. I once again am going to skip both of the rare candies that take too much time in Johto, the Whirl Islands candy and the Mount Mortar candy. Will's team and Koga's team are easy for Kangaskhan to manage without additional rare candies, and then using Headbutt in combination with Return gives me a fairly reliable way to bypass Bruno's Machamp. By the way, just to check in with damage ranges here, Mach Punch from Hitmonchan has a max damage roll of 23%, and then Cross Chop from Machamp without a critical hit does 74. So Kangaskhan will survive, provided it doesn't miss the damage roll on Return against the Hitmontop at the beginning of the battle. I only have a 71.3% chance to knock it out. Overall though, my odds in this battle are quite good. For Karen and Lance, I teach Ice Punch. It's helpful for coverage, but Hidden Power Ground is really the move that you're going to be wondering about here. Why not teach Earthquake for the Gengar? And the answer is, why would you spend time picking up Earthquake when Hidden Power Ground can just do the job anyway? And that's the amazing thing about Kangaskhan, it can cut so much of the bloat in the runs because it doesn't need to constantly be shifting its moveset. It just gets good moves and then beats everything. Now against Lance, I'm making a small mistake. I should be holding the Nevermelt Ice. Turns out Kangaskhan pulls through here without getting paralyzed. I was very lucky. The first Ice Punch gets a 23% damage roll, and then the second one fails this but freezes the Dragonite, so I knock it out too. This is kind of funny because in Snowy's run, they got critical hits against both Dragonites. And if I equip the Nevermelt Ice, the Ice Punch damage range improves to 66.5% against the first 2 weaker Dragonites. So it's a pretty reliable damage range. Defeating Lance, Kangaskhan gets a 48-minute and 1-second split, which is just fantastic. Throughout all of Kanto, my moveset doesn't change. This is just what Kangaskhan needs. It's really simple. And then for red, I am going to once again revert back to the set that I used previously. Return, Dynamic Punch, Headbutt, and Attract. This is not the most reliable strategy, and it is by far the most dangerous point in the run for Kangaskhan. That said, there's still a decent chance for it to win, and from what I could tell, Kangaskhan's odds against red actually go down if we utilize the curse strategy. It's not leveraging its high speed, it doesn't get to leverage its gender, which is unique, and it's also not leveraging Headbutt's flinch chance. This is some fun unique synergy, and with it, Kangaskhan clocks in with a final follow-up playthrough time of 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 11 seconds, with 1 reset, 0 blackouts at level 68. This is a game time of 4 hours and 7 minutes. Okay, comparing these final runs, we can see that Kangaskhan has pulled slightly more into the lead than it was before. Blissey and Chansey are still quite far apart, but they're overall not very good. You'll also notice that I did 3 Kangaskhan playthroughs. I was able to do them and a bunch of restarts to Bugsy in the same amount of time that I allocated for just 2 runs with both Chansey and Blissey. This is the advantage of having a Pokemon that beats the game really quickly, and I mean really quickly. First of all, let's rank the worst Pokemon today. With Chansey's final playthrough results, it was not able to get a time under 2 hours, so it earns itself the top placement in the F tier, just ahead of Pokemon like Gligar and Natu. Blissey on the other hand did better, but not much better. It gets itself the second last placement in the C tier, behind Pokemon like Dunsparce, Pupitar, and Smoochum. I guess it beat Aerodactyl. I could probably get a better time with the Fossil if I sat down and played it today though. Maybe I'll re-rank that one on stream sometime next last year. Okay, now let's reflect on the hypothesis that I had at the beginning of the year. Normal types are the best Pokemon in Crystal version. And today, with Kangaskhan's 1 hour and 3 minute time, it asserts normal type's dominance over the bug type, taking the top spot away from Scizor. Honestly, Kangaskhan is a beast in this game. If you are looking for a fun and fast run to play, especially when you're learning these solo challenges, I highly recommend using this Pokemon. It's much less fragile when compared with a Pokemon like Scizor that has a 4x weakness to fire type moves, so you don't have to be as specific about things like stat values. Okay, one last thing before I close out this video, because I want to wrap around and talk about my Tauros run from my last video in Crystal version. A lot of people have pointed out the fact that Tauros can fight the rivals Ghastly at the beginning of the game at level 12, and then level up once it defeats the Ghastly into the Zubat, learning Horn Attack for the remainder of the fight. This allows it to make it through the early stages of the game at a much lower level and have a faster time. I'll have to do that on stream sometime in the future. I haven't had time yet to play that run. Just know that I'm aware of that strategy. Hopefully I'll show it off to all of you in the future. Now, if you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, it means the world to me. You really do keep the lights on over here. Okay, so this was the penultimate Crystal video of this year. There is still one more. We need to see what happens when we give normal types Swords Dance. So next week, I'm going to do 2 backports, Zangoose and Diggersby. Both Pokemon that get access to Swords Dance extremely early on into the game. I think it's going to be a really exciting match. Now, if you have made it this far, you are incredible. I'll see you in tomorrow's video when Daily December continues.